So today I'd like to talk about a tool I've discovered from a company called IDAS Digital. You may have heard of these guys. They a lot of them were actually worked with me back in the day at Meridium, and they've created some really cool tools. And the reason I bring it up today is because one of these tools is absolutely free. I was actually shocked to see what you can get for free. It's called Asset Risk Analyzer, and I'm going to demonstrate it here in just a minute. But there's no cost. Of course, they're not a nonprofit, right? So they, you can upgrade and get more capability and more features and so forth. But just to kind of get your feet wet and just to kind of see what the tool does, it's absolutely free. So let me tell you basically what it does, and then I'll demonstrate it in the actual tool. So a lot of times we struggle in a reliability program of, kind of where do we start? Which assets do we look at, that kind of thing. So what this tool does is this allows you to get a data set out of, your maintenance management system, whether it be, SAP, Maximo, whatever you have. And you essentially download some work history, your work order history for a series of assets. Now, the trial version, the free version, allows you to make 10 analyses, and each of those analyses can have up to 100 assets in it that it can analyze for you, which I think is really great. That's quite a bit of capability. So the idea is you'll go and you'll go into your system and you'll pull out the history for 100 of your assets, let's say. It doesn't have to be 100, but let's just use that as an example. And what you want to do is you want to get the history of all those, events, right? So you're going to want to have the cost information, and that cost could be maintenance costs, but it could also be production loss types of costs as well. You can kind of merge those into the tool. It doesn't specify, so it just says basically what's the impact of an event. And basically you just need to give it some really basic information, and I'll show you they provide a downloadable template, basically an Excel spreadsheet, and you put in the work history information, and then there's a way to kind of suck that into the tool, and then from there it just analyzes and it gives you kind of a profile of what assets are really the ones that need most of the work, and it compares it to a database that they have of industry standard typical life. So let's say, typical life of a pump is, I don't know, let's say 5 years, and you're getting, 2 years. Well, it's going to point that out, and it's going to show you what the opportunity is if you can get that asset up to at least the best practice level. So I think it's a really great tool. I just wanted to make you aware of it. There's really no cost, and there's really no risk to kicking the tires and seeing if you like it. I particularly liked it being a consultant because it's nice to be able to, maybe show a potential client of, here's some opportunity of some assets that really are not performing, where we could, use some of these reliability practices and tools to be able to get those assets up to a point where they're producing and giving you the sort of the value that you'd expect, and you actually put some dollar values on what that opportunity is. So let's take a look at the tool and see what you think. Okay, so let's get started with the tool. So the way to get to it is it's a website. You go to assetriskanalyzer.com. And I'll document that at the end of the video just in case you forget. Really easy to get to. So it'll kind of take you up to this sort of home page, and then from here you can take a look. They've got kind of a sample analysis just to kind of, if you don't want to load your own data, you can kind of kick the tires on just some sample data they've already given you. But the crux of it is to create a new one that is actually more meaningful to you, which is some data that that you compile and that you can load into the tool. So I'm going to give you a rough idea of what that would look like and what's entailed with that. And then, of course, if you had some already existing, you could open those up as well. Okay. The way it works, like I said, it's the tool's free. They give you sort of a limited feature set, and they kind of limit you on how many analyses you can do and that kind of thing. But they really give you a lot. They give you you can do 10 analyses for free, and you can have up to 100 assets listed in each of those 10. So basically, you get 1,000 analyses or 1,000 assets you can analyze using the free tool. So anyway, I thought it was pretty cool, and really they give you a lot for free. So let's take a look. So I'm going to bypass this one, although I'm going to use some of the sample data just to kind of show you what it would look like. So you come over here and you say, okay, I'm going to create myself a new analysis, and you want to give it some useful name. Making something up there, be whatever you want. So give it some sort of meaningful name. Got to give the analysis a start date. I'm just going to default mine to today. And then it needs to know your mission time, because a lot of the calculations are based on the mission time. So I'm going to just default this to 1 year. Let's just say my mission time is 1 year. So that's really all it needs. You can give it a long description, kind of give it more details if you want, but that's not required. So the next thing you got to do is you got to give it some data. So if you come down here into, basically this is going to turn into a grid. Right now there's no records in the grid because we haven't put any yet. So you've got a couple ways to do this. You can kind of fat finger them in. If you have the data, you could just sort of type them in. Or you can import them, and that's what we're going to do. Now, I've already got a spreadsheet already ready to go. It's super simple. You'll see when I show you the spreadsheet. And to do it yourself, all you need to do is hit download template, and it gives you all the instructions. It's just a spreadsheet, and one of the tabs will have the instructions, and then the other tab will be where you actually put your data into the spreadsheet so that you can import it. Okay, so since I've already done that, I'm going to show you what it looks like. So in this spreadsheet, and this is kind of what the template looks like. So when you download it, it'll have some, some basic instructions on how to do it. And then on the Asset tab, that's where you put your information. So on column A, the asset name, this is where you'll put your, whether it be a functional location or, a technical ID or whatever it is that uniquely identifies your assets. You'd go ahead and put that here in the first column. Then you want to give a description of the asset. Now, where I came from, we did a really good job of putting our equipment, giving it actual very useful names. Like, for instance, if it was a pump, we always started with the word pump. If it was a motor, we always started with the word motor. So that, just made it easier, so it was very consistent as to what types of assets you were working with. I will say you want to put something in here that somehow tells it what type of asset it is, because the tool is going to use some intelligence, and it's going to look at it. It's going to say, oh, I see a keyword, centrifugal pump. I'm going to assume that's, a pump, and it's going to match it against a database of equipment, sort of best practice equipment data. So for instance, there's a library that it's going to compare to and say, well, the typical life that we see with a pump is, X number of months, and it needs to know that your asset is of a certain type. So you don't need to match theirs. All you need to do is make sure that you put in a keyword. Now it's not going to find everything, depending on the type of industry you're in. But typical manufacturing equipment, right? We're going to have pumps and gearboxes, motors, compressors. It's going to pick up most of that kind of stuff. So just make sure those keywords are in your description. Then you'll have to do a little bit of work on your end to get this, but you're going to want to put in basically the average or your mean time between failure. So what I would do with that is I would go into my maintenance system, and I would spit out, okay, for this pump up here, I'm going to look at the work history. I'm going to say, oh, well, we've had, 12 repairs or 12 failures, however you want to define that. And that's totally up to you. And then you're going to define what that time period is. So what some people would do is just pick the first failure, say that happened on January 1st of 2005 through now. That's basically, 17 years of data. And then you take that total time frame, and then you would divide by the number of failures or repairs, depending on how your data is structured, to give you that average time to repair or to a failure. Okay, you don't need to get super precise about this, right? You want a rough estimate of what your mean time between failure is for each one of the assets. Okay, and here we've given you a range of some really low ones and some some pretty high ones. Then the consequence is in dollars, and that could be maintenance cost only. That's okay. If you had LPO cost, lost production opportunity, a lot of people call it that, basically production loss data, you could merge those together. So, we've lost $3 million in production, and we lost $500,000 in all the repair costs. So our total consequence would be, say, $3.5 million. Okay. So again, totally up to you to put the consequence value in there. But as precise as you can make it, the more accurate the tool will be. Okay. So I'm going to close this, and what we're going to do is we're going to import this data into the tool. Okay. So what I'm going to do is, here I've got the file right here. It's just the same file I just showed you. And to make it simple, they make it really easy. You can just drag and drop it. So if I come over here, I just drop that spreadsheet, and it's going to load that information into the database, and it's going to actually do the analysis after it loads it, and boom, they're all in here. So here's what it did for us. So first of all, it pulled in all the equipment numbers for us. It pulled in our MTBF, and what we're seeing over here, I just wanted to point this out. You'll notice these descriptions don't match what you saw in the spreadsheet. What it did is it looked at that data and it said, oh, I saw the keyword pump, so I know it's a rotating asset and I know it's a pump. So the tool has, again, some, I don't know, AI, artificial intelligence. I don't know exactly how it works, but it's looking at your data and it's trying to figure out how the asset actually fits to match the library of the equipment in the comparison that it does. So the next thing that it does is it says, okay, well, what I want to know is what is my opportunity of, where are my poor performing assets? So let me sort here so it'll give you a better idea of what it's doing. So what it's doing is it's saying, okay, of the assets that have a probability of failure of greater than 50%. Now that's within a year period. Remember, we picked a mission time of 1 year. So it's telling us that, we've got some assets that have a pretty high probability of having a failure within that time period. And based on that, it looks at the cost of those failures. Okay, those are the costs that, if it fails, those are the costs that we put in the tool to say, this is what it's going to cost us, whether it be maintenance or lost production or both. And then this column is kind of a close cousin to this. What it's doing is it's a multiplier of the probability times the cost of failure to kind of give you a feel of what the financial risk is. Okay, so in order for them to roll up the opportunity, they're essentially saying if the asset has a 50% chance of failing in this 1 year time period, then we're going to say those are your opportunities. So that's where that 880,000 is basically all the ones above 50%. So if you were to add up from here to here, it's going to equal about $880,000. Okay. The overall risk exposure is the multiplier of the probability of failure times the cost. So just kind of seeing that, you can kind of get a feel for, kind of your bad actor list. Okay. And, this thing is kind of giving us a comparison of if they're in the kind of the yellow here, what that means is that they're below the industry standard. So like I said before, there's a database of, classes of equipment and what the best practice value is for MTBF. And it's comparing that and it's saying, okay, well, if it's below that, then we're kind of flagging it here with these yellow icons. Okay. If they're green, it means you've exceeded that best practice. So now that we've, just this, it kind of gives you some, kind of a nice visualization of your bad actors, right? And it goes kind of one step farther because it's giving you a comparison to sort of industry best practices, right? So, you kind of get a feel for, okay, for pumps, we're below. You can see for some fixed equipment, even though they're fairly high numbers, they're below the industry standard. So that's kind of what you're seeing is per equipment class, there's a best practice value, and your MTBF values are getting compared to that value. Okay, so the next step is, okay, what do we do now? What can we do about this? What's our next step? Okay, so there's some tools up here where you can go, okay, well, let's play some what ifs. Now, you can't do a ton of here because they limit you to some degree on the free version. You can do a lot more if you have the paid version, but you can still kind of play around with this. So you come over here to Add Scenario. So I'm going to come over here and I'm going to click this Add Scenario button, and I'm going to say, I'm just going to make something up here. Improve asset strategies. I could type, and perform RCA. So maybe we're saying that, we're going to do some RCAs and kind of get a feel for why these things are bad actors. And, based on the outcomes of that RCA, probably we're going to see some opportunity to improve our asset strategies. Okay. And you could put even more specific details on that if you'd like. And then they kind of say, okay, well, do you want to get this up to what the benchmark says? So in other words, we're going to assume that these opportunities, right, these tasks that we're going to do, the improved strategies, RCAs, etc., what that's going to do for us is it's going to get us to at least the IDIS benchmark, right, that best practice for each of the equipment classes. Okay. You can do that for all the assets. You can do it for only assets that you've selected. Now, I didn't select any, so I'm not going to use that. But you could cherry pick. You could do just the pumps, or you could do just the gearboxes or whatever. Or you can also compare to what you think your best practice is. So maybe in your company, maybe your corporate folks have, got some numbers that say, hey, we expect to get 6 years out of our centrifugal pumps. So you could use, your numbers rather than the IDIS best practice. Okay, so here I'm just going to pick the base case here and pick the first one. And then I'm just going to hit Create and close this dialog box. Okay, so what this is saying now is we've reduced our this is our potential savings by doing those things. Whatever those activities are, by doing those, we're going to increase the life to the point where we're not going to have those failures within that 1 year mission time. Okay? Now, that's sort of hitting the 9 assets that had the low MTBF. There's still a little bit of inherent risk, right? Because you got some other assets that, they're not perfect. They're not going to run 100%. No asset's going to run 100%. So there's still a little bit of inherent risk. But the tool kind of gives you a sense of, hey, if we could get that reliability up on these assets, or at least some of these assets, this is the potential benefit that we're going to get. And this is kind of a nice tool to, kind of show management. Says, okay, this is here's our bad actors. Here's how they compare to best practice. And if we were to do, these improvements, this is the potential benefits that we expect to see. So it's a nice kind of cool, clean way to do that. And then, IDIS, they're, the bigger picture is they've got a lot of cool tools to really help you do that, right? They've got some great tools to be able to actually implement strategies. They have a library of strategies that you could implement on various equipment types. And they can even help you monitor them, right? So they can link up with, process historians, and they can actually kind of monitor to see, one, are we actually doing the tasks? And two, are we getting the benefits from doing it? So it's really kind of a cool way to see what our improvement capabilities are. What is the opportunity, and then it's really up to you to decide, okay, what's the next step? How do we start to take advantage of these opportunities? Okay, so in a nutshell, that's sort of the tool, right? You get your data out of your maintenance system, put it into I showed you a very simple spreadsheet. Immediately you can import that data, and it will tell you, where you compare with those assets to the benchmark. And then it gives you some, out of the box for free, it gives you some basic tools on, to see what the benefits of doing some reliability improvements would actually be. So, check it out. So, like I said, it's free. There's really no harm in, kind of kicking the tires. If you want to try it out, you can go to Asset Risk Analyzer. And again, I'm going to, make sure that that's documented here at the end of the video with that actual website. So hopefully you see some value here. Might want to kick the tires, give it a try. If you have any questions, send me an email. I'll put my email at the end of the video as well. Happy to show you what I think would be the advantages of using a tool like this. And maybe in a future video, I'll take a look at some of their asset performance capabilities, where they can actually implement a strategy and monitor it for you. So maybe in a future video I can show you how some of those capabilities could be used as a follow-up to the risk tool. Okay, so thanks for listening. Again, that's my name is Ken Latino, and I just wanted to kind of give you a kind of a rough idea of a simple tool that you could use to analyze some of your production assets. Thanks for listening.